A man lies on a bed of gold, weeping. Weeping for one and only one reason. He is cursed. But this is no ordinary curse. This curse was brought upon by himself. For this is the story of King Midas. It all began with a good-natured walk through the forest. Midas strolled along, touching the trees and admiring the birds. He looked up and up, consumed by the simple pleasures of life. Perhaps too consumed, as he tripped and fell over a most mysterious creature.
Zeus, damn it! I'll kill the wretch that woke me from that dream.
For it was a satyr, an ugly satyr, old and decrepit. He smelled of wine and moldy cheese, and seemed to have drunk himself into a stupor.
Good Lord. It would seem I have soiled myself.
His name was Silenus, and he was disgusting. Now, most kings would have immediately slain such a beast, but not Midas. Midas understood the importance of hospitality, and so he invited the satyr into his house and allowed him to have full access to his stores, his food, his wine, and everything in between. Now many days passed, yet Midas heard nothing from Silenus. So he went to his staff and inquired about how the creature was getting along, to which they replied,
My lord, this beast is unbearable. He drinks all the wine, he devours all the food, and
Yes?
You can say it. He has been defecating in the empty wine jars.
Now, despite Silenus's greedy behavior, Midas proved to be an implacable host. He spoke no ill word of the satyr and allowed him to plunder his stores. But after 10 days of feasting, drinking, and pooping, Silenus made an important announcement.
I hope your horses are as good as your wine, for I shall be leaving on the morrow.
He would be leaving on the morrow, returning to his master, Dionysus, the god of wine. But Midas would not be relieved of his duty yet, for as host, it was his responsibility to ensure the satyr made it safely to his next home. And so on the morrow, Midas kissed his daughter goodbye and hugged his wife, promising them that he shall return. A promise he meant to keep, and so with great speed the caravan left and brought Silenus safely to Dionysus, who upon the arrival of his favorite lackey leaped for joy and exclaimed,
Ah, Silenus, good to see you. I feared you drunk yourself to death, and I almost did, had it not been for one man. A man, you say? A king. He showed me great hospitality. I drank his wine, I ate his food, and I pooped right in his bathtub. What? Well, that's Greek hospitality if I've ever heard it, and deserving of a reward.
And at that moment, Dionysus turned to Midas and brought him forward. He offered him one gift, and one gift alone, saying,
Well, merciful king, you shall have one wish, and one wish alone. And if it's within my power, I shall grant it. Anything? Anything.
Many moments passed while Midas thought, until finally he made his request to the god of wine, who said,
You'd like everything you touch to turn to gold? Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Okay. Did it work? I feel no different. No, you must first go home and bathe in some wine. But I warn you, wishes can very easily become curses. So think very carefully before you proceed.
Midas did not heed the warning, and that night, after a sleepless slumber, he finally awoke. Yet something was different. His bed felt hard and cold. His sheets were stiff, and then he realized they had turned to gold. So in a rush, Midas leapt from his bed and went out to his garden, where he decided to test Dionysus's promise. So he found a plant and touched it. And sure enough, it turned to gold.
Bullseye.
Midas smiled a wild smile, and like a child with a new toy, he hopped around the house, turning all he saw to gold. This plant, that chair, these jars, it was magical. Nay, impossible. And yet here it was. Midas was rich. Rich beyond all belief. And so he let out a great screech of joy.
Whoa! What are you doing?
When suddenly, Midas's wife and daughter appeared. Overjoyed by this great gift, Midas rushed over to his family, and with great zest he grabbed them in a fatherly embrace. Yet in that moment, he heard a most peculiar sound. His wife suddenly felt stiff, and his daughter's hand felt quite hard. So Midas pulled away and saw the horrible truth. He had turned his family to solid gold. Liquid tears came down his cheeks as he let out a great cry.
No!
This was no gift, but a curse. Dionysus had tricked him, the bastard, and now all Midas could do was weep. And in his sadness he turned to the pleasures of life. But alas, apples turned to gold in his mouth, wine dried up in his throat, and even his soft bed became hard to the touch. And there, upon his prison of gold, Midas fell into a deep, restless slumber. And in his dreams the visage of Dionysus appeared, and said to him,
Foolish human, if you wish to rid yourself of this curse, then follow these words. You must go down to the river by the old oak tree and wash your hands in its sacred waters. And while you do this, chant my mantra, Om Pili Pili Poo. Do this, and anything you put in that river shall be healed. Now be gone! I must go to the river.
Midas awoke with a start, and immediately knew what he must do. So he ran to the river and frantically washed his hands, while singing Dionysus's mantra. Minutes passed, yet Midas felt no different. His hands were his hands, and so he found a nearby leaf and touched it.
Oh, bullseye.
Midas appeared to be cured, and then, like a bolt of lightning, he remembered the god's word.
And anything you put in that river shall be healed.
And so he sprinted back to his house, grabbed his frozen family, and returned them to the river. He washed them long, and he washed them hard, and lo, Dionysus granted his wish.
What happened?
Midas leapt with joy and thanked the gods, swearing off all material pleasures. Now many years passed, and Midas's fervent discipline increased. He sought no gold, no land, no pleasure, and eventually he left his crown behind to follow a famous satyr named Pan. Now Pan was famous for one thing and one thing alone. He was fabulous with an instrument. So fabulous that the god Apollo challenged him to a duel. A music duel, where both sides would play their best and let the crowd decide the victor. Pan played and played, putting his very soul into the song, and it was fantastic. Some would say divine. Yet once Apollo played, there could be no doubt who was the victor. As the crowd of onlookers said,
It's clearly Apollo. He played the out of that liar. Yep, definitely Apollo.
All agreed, save one.
You're all wrong. Pan clearly won. And if anyone disagrees, then they must have the ears of an ass.
For Midas, loving Pan so dearly, proclaimed him to be the winner. And furthermore, he insulted anyone who dared to disagree, claiming that they all had the ears of an ass. To which Apollo replied,
What did you say? Nothing? No. I'd like you to say it again, for apparently my ears aren't very good. Well, I said Pan clearly won. That wasn't all of it. And say it. And say it. If anyone disagrees, then they must have the ears of an ass. That's what I thought. And an ironic statement coming from you.
And in that moment, Midas felt a curious sensation on his scalp. It felt as if two flaming holes were breaching right through his skin. And then they came out. Ears. Ass's ears. And everyone began to laugh. A cruel laugh and a harsh laugh. And Midas, in his shame, began to flee all the way through the old forest into a great lake. And in those waters he peered at his reflection and said,
My God, I must hide these forever.
So Midas vowed never to allow another human to see his shame. So he covered his ears and returned back to his kingdom, to his empty throne, where none knew of his affliction, not even his wife, for he refused to ever remove his covering. But with time, Midas ran into a different problem. His hair was bursting forth from the covering, meaning he must find a barber, and fast. So he went to a local man and said,
Now what I'm about to tell you must never leave this room. Do you understand me? But of course, my lord, I value my tongue as much as my hands. Good. Good. Now please, don't laugh. Oh, you look so ridiculous. Oh, all right, I'm sorry. If you're done, I'd like to negotiate.
Midas and the barber struck up a deal. The barber would cut Midas's hair, and for his silence would be given a handsome salary. A pretty good deal. And for many months the two engaged in a friendly, prosperous relationship. But something began to bother the barber. An itch that he couldn't quite scratch. This secret became a burden, a weight, and he felt he needed to tell someone to get this secret off his chest. But how? If he told his wife, he would lose his head. If he told his friend, he would lose his head. But what if he told nobody at all? Or at least no living thing. So the barber traveled deep into the wilderness on a dark, cool night. He passed the rough trails and through the trodden ground until he found an untouched area, a secluded river, and by its beaches he did the only sensible thing. He dug a hole, a big hole, to contain the most valuable resource of all.
Midas has ass's ears. Ass's ears. His ears.
Knowledge, as the barber yelled his dark secret into the hole. And thus the burden was lifted. But alas, the barber did not account for one thing. A seed, a remnant of Echo, resided within that hole. Now the seeds of Echo exist all across Greece, nay, the world, and are cursed to do one thing. Midas has ass's ears. Repeat what they've heard. So once this seed of Echo heard the barber's secret, it began to repeat it, and repeat it. First the seeds, then the reeds, even the trees. And eventually the echo spread all the way to Midas's garden, the one just outside his bedroom chamber. And here, Midas would awake from a most peaceful sleep to a most horrifying nightmare.
I am refreshed.
Midas has ass's ears.
What? Who said that? Who dare speak this malarkey?
Midas has ass's ears. Midas has ass's ears.
No. No. It can't be.
Midas has ass's ears.
Well, at least I have one final option.
Midas was tired. So very tired. So he grabbed the concoction from the table and... Thus came the end of King Midas.